I'm Tristan Stubbs of CDKN here in Cancun, Mexico, with Indi McLymont-Lafayette of Panos Caribbean. Indi, could you tell me a bit about your work with Panos Caribbean?
Okay, I'm the Regional Director of Media, Community and Environment, and we work in the Caribbean on communicating development issues. At the moment, the Caribbean is identified as one of the most vulnerable areas for climate impacts. And while we are happy with the level of policy work that is being done to prepare the islands, there is a big gap when it comes to communication issues. Panos is working with at least 4 other regional partners to ensure that the policy developments that are currently being put in place for the Caribbean are supported with the proper communication infrastructure. Based on the limited research that we've done, there's a gap between the policy and what the vulnerable sectors and people in the regular people in the islands know about climate change. And unless that gap is filled with sustained information, persons won't be able to make informed decisions to adjust to climate change. And so we are targeting 15 to 16 Caribbean islands, mainly English speaking, and the Dominican Republic, which is Spanish speaking, to reach out, working with the media, with vulnerable sectors, producing a variety of public education materials so that we can really vamp up what we have now. There's work going on in the region, but it's very ad hoc and sporadic, so we want something more systematic and sustained. We're discussing that and also fundraising, because some of the islands in the Caribbean, for example, Barbuda is predicted to sink in 40 to 50 years. That's within my lifetime. And we want to ensure that we start addressing the issues. Now we're having hurricanes that devastate, our economies. For example, Hurricane Nicole in September really devastated Jamaica, tropical storm. Another tropical storm after wiped out the entire banana industry for St. Lucia. So it's a very serious issue for us that we need to be putting the proper adaptation measures in place for, and to be communicating and ensuring the population is ready to adjust.
In working with the media, how do you ensure that you have a good working relationship, especially given that the Caribbean is such a diverse region?
That's a good one. Well, what we have done in terms of the Caribbean, Panos Caribbean is part of the Climate Change Media Partnership. And each year that Climate Change Partnership takes 35 to 40 journalists to the UN Climate Change Conference to cover. Now we have at least 3 normally that's from the Caribbean. And what we found is that it raises so much awareness because the journalists are feeding back immediately from here. It holds the policymakers and the negotiators from the region accountable. So we are able to immediately see what they've signed on to. So when they come back, we can say, what does this mean for us as the islands? What are we expected to do? Prior to this, the negotiators would come back, do their reports, and it stays within government. Civil society and the rest of society would not have access to that information. So the media's role has been very critical in driving climate change and putting it on the general national agendas of the different islands. If we can really scale up that and have more journalists from the region, because 2 or 3 is really very limited, but it's working, and that's something we're trying to ensure that continues. So it's a work in progress, but very critical and important work nonetheless.
Presumably with the climatic conditions that you just mentioned, so hurricanes and so forth, it's becoming easier to convince people of the reality of climate change in the Caribbean.
It's easier to convince persons, but I think where the difficulty lies is behavior change. Persons still sometimes do not put the proper planning in place. In fact, the last storm we had in Jamaica, persons were upset because the government pushed for planning and everybody planned, we closed down and we adjusted. But the storm didn't hit as badly as predicted, and people were saying we spent money and we did this and nothing came. So one thought is that the next one they're not going to prepare as much. So it's getting the message that no matter, as soon as a storm threatens, you have to consistently prepare no matter how it turns out. But it's also psychologically very hard to deal with because you cannot plan for our hurricane season from June to November, it's been very busy and we've had to postpone lots of events, we've been hit. So it's very unstable and it's hard to adjust, and so we have to be addressing some of those issues as well as planning at the same time.
Indeed, that's great. Thanks very much.
All right.